Hello, everyone. So this is the next in our series of success in cardiology, and particularly for women. And today I'm absolutely delighted to have with us a lady who is described as a cardio-feminist. She is Professor Emeritus of Cardiology for Women at the Radboud University in the Netherlands. She has been on many committees and also, excitingly, has recently released a book on misogyny in health, which is going to be translated for us next year, currently only in Dutch. She was also on the Dutch Women's Council UN representative in 2021 and is a senior member of the Women in One organization. Welcome, Professor Maas, and thank you very much for being with us today. So I have heard you stand up and speak briefly, and absolutely loved what you had to say about women can be successful as women rather than having to pretend to be men. So could you talk to us a little bit on that?
Yeah, well, if you look at the healthcare system, it's all wired along, the male model. How we look at patients, but also how organizations in healthcare are built up. Often not suited for women in different stages of life, not very flexible. When you have little children, also at the university, the publications you need, the targets you have to reach. And what you see now, that there are many women also in training for cardiology or other medical disciplines. They just leave because they say, well, in this type of culture, I don't want to stay for the rest of my life. And what's done so often is that we deliver all kinds of courses for women to adapt to this system. But we should ask, is this system still valid in this time we're living? So we shouldn't fix the women, but we should try to fix the system and do it all together.
Yes, absolutely. So how can we go about doing that?
Well, I think it all starts with awareness. And what happens when you go into medicine as a specialist, into hospitals, you have to adapt to the existing culture. Otherwise, you'll get isolated, in the end, burned out, and you disappear. So you have to behave a bit like all the others do for so many decades. And so we ourselves, when we enter the hospitals, we help to keep the system as it is. So we have to be aware of our own role in this system. And also looking at women, I remember clearly when I started cardiology in the 80s that we laughed at women. I did too, because they had stupid symptoms. They didn't fit in the model. We often felt a bit offended by female patients because, we did an exercise test and a heart cath, and they didn't have the stenosis that they should have, like men have and what's written in the books. So, in fact, we were quite angry at those women because, they didn't behave like they should do. So it took several decades before the progress in imaging in cardiology learned us that the process of atherosclerosis is different. But, we behaved quite unfriendly to those women, and we often translated symptoms into, well, stress and between the ears and psychiatry, anxiety, all things that women seem to have. So healthcare has been very unfriendly towards women, but also towards the women working in healthcare. And what they often say, well, there's so many female doctors now, it will disappear, it will be okay. It doesn't change automatically because all those women, they adapt to the culture. So we have to start discussing what we do wrong. And also in this new book, I've written quite a lot of things that I did wrong. Change starts with looking at yourself, what you did wrong. And as long as we're not willing to do that, the system is not going to change.
Can you give us an example of what people should not do
Yeah.
that you did wrong?
Yeah, well, we have learned to look away when unpleasant things happen. I remember uh, about 15 years ago, perhaps 20, we had a first junior student coming into hospital to have a look what we were doing in cardiology, a trainee, and she had a headscarf. And one of my colleagues didn't like that. So he was pulling at the headscarf all the time. So, and he said to her, well, take this off, and tomorrow you don't have this headscarf on your head anymore. And it was really insulting in her personal life environment, what he was doing. And what I did, I walked away. I went to do something else because I was good with this colleague. We could work together quite good. And, something happened which was not right, but I walked away. And I think we should stop to walk away. We should say, hey, what are you doing? Don't touch this woman in this way. But it happens all the time. And also when, women from new women, new migrants living in the Netherlands, when they have a difficult name that we don't understand or which is difficult to speak out, we just call her girl or little girl or lady, instead of we're learning that names can be very different from our common names. We are not all Johnson or.
Do you think we are improving though? My feeling is that if you do stand up now and say that's not acceptable, it will be taken on more readily than perhaps back in the day.
It's still difficult to stand up alone, and we should stand up together. This is the only way to make the changes, because if you stand up on your own all the time, they want to get rid of you, because it's also always that person being nasty and having comments. So we should race together. That's the only way to make changes, together with the man, together with everyone. And that's about inclusiveness, that we all take the responsibility, for younger people, for other people, because we have to manage healthcare altogether. We need everyone.
Yes. I agree with that entirely. Let's do it together, and not just the women. I mean, there are actually now a number of men who are prepared to stand with us. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at some point, though, you managed to stand up.
I survived.
And you survived. So how do we do this? So if you are in a culture and the people around you are doing kind of inappropriate things and no one is saying anything, what would your advice be for someone who really feels they should say something?
I have to say first that my journey hasn't been easy, because I worked for 20 years in a very ambitious group of cardiologists, 15 men, 1 woman. That was me. And I was also interested in intervention cardiology, but there was no room for me going into intervention cardiology, because the men, they all wanted to do that. So I was already interested in cardiology in women, and my colleagues thought, well, let her let all the stupid women go to her. So in fact, I got all room to develop cardiology in women, but it also led to isolation because, I ended up being isolated with my female cardiology practice, far away from the group that was doing something else. So when I got my, before I got my my appointment as a professor, I was quite, in fact, I lost my empathy. I was, in fact, lonely in my job. So I had a coach for about 1.5 years, quite intensively, um, to to find my soul a bit back, because I hardened in this environment that was so unfriendly and competitive. That's how male macho worlds are, very competitive, unfriendly, don't cry. Um, so I needed help to find myself back. So it hasn't been an easy journey. I never got burned out, but I think if I didn't have this very nice woman who helped me, I would have been burned out, I'm sure.
So you're talking about a life coach. So you would advise people to get a life coach early.
Yeah, but I can also advise this to the men. So it shouldn't always be the woman who need a coach or a training or whatever. You have to realize when you work in a quite harsh environment, a lot of competition, that this affects your empathy. It does something with you.
Mm-hmm.
And, it harms you when you work there for 40 years. So you have to work on your, how you are, your own heart, in fact.
Mm-hmm. So when we were younger, there weren't very many women who went before who had been successful and so on. But now, one of the reasons for doing this series is that we want to show people that there actually are, quite a number of women out there now who have been successful. So do you think that, the women who've been successful before can be, they're not life coaches, but can they helpfully be mentors to the younger women coming up and stop them from having these struggles?
Sure. I think the senior women, they can give very good advice. And I had many mentors. And having a mentor doesn't mean that there's one person you talk with from time to time. But a mentor can be someone that you follow on the internet or that you meet once in a couple of years. But, you look at her and you learn some things that she did well or did not did well. So, and I think that's an important task also for me at this stage of my, well, let's say life, the end of my career, to warn women to make the same mistakes and to help women to move faster, but also to talk with men why they are doing things they do. And I think there's a good development in the UK now, that there's still a lot of harassment in hospitals, also in academia, that there's now more attention to stop that. It's an issue now, and we should help younger people to to make it more easy to work on that on a friendlier environment.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and honestly, I think we are doing. I mean, I think there are a lot of women out there now who are trying to do that. So there is hope for the future, because this series is also for people who are just beginning now, and we don't want to put them off from choosing a career which has been very satisfying, certainly for me. Um, and for you, do you have any regrets about the career path you took?
No, no, no. Well, regret. Uh, from time to time, I've been a bit too hard for myself. So I remember my first pregnancy. I worked in the cath lab until 1 week before delivery. I almost delivered in the cath lab. And I remember I have two sons. My second pregnancy, I waited to tell the group until I was 6.5 months pregnant. And then there was one colleague who had 4 children. He told me that one child was enough for me. Uh, but the funny thing is, I had an interview with Circulation 17 years later, and I told this story. So it went around in all Dutch cardiology that this has happened, and everyone knew who this guy was who told me this story. But along the way, I remember I broke a shoulder, and it wasn't fixed well in the first operation. So I worked for half a year with a limp and painful shoulder. I could only drive with one hand, and I did my night duties, even a puncture, a tamponade in the heart, just with one hand. And I felt guilty when I had to be operated for the second time, that I had to cancel for a week my outpatient clinic. I felt guilty, you know. And in first I thought, well, perhaps I've become hysterical that my arm doesn't work. You start to think also about yourself, how everyone thinks about women having health conditions. I thought, well, I may be hysterical. But it was very painful. And after the second operation, I could do everything with my arm. It was over. It was good. And I also remember my second son, I think that's now 8 years ago, he needed to have chemotherapy. And so I never canceled my outpatient clinic. I was just doing my patient. And just one level above me, my son was having chemo. Mm-hmm. And now I think he's okay. He's well. He's fine. But I think I should have canceled my outpatient clinic to sit next to my son. Why didn't I do that?
Because you care too much about your patients, which is good, and something you didn't want to lose, that caring. So it is part of every doctor, but I think often women do feel it more acutely.
Yeah.
So you had 2 sons in the end. Did you have more? Was that it? Just the 2 sons?
Yeah, 2 sons, yeah.
How did you feel about maternity leave back then, and how it's changed now?
Well, maternity leave, after my 2 sons were born, I skipped my regular holidays to put in the maternity leave. So, breastfeeding 4 weeks, and within 6 weeks, I was back with both children.
And this was in the
because
Netherlands.
I felt guilty of maternity leave, But this was
in the Netherlands? Was
35 years ago. Sorry?
Was it expected to take maternity leave? In medicine in general, maybe not in cardiology, but was it allowed and expected to take a longer period of maternity leave than that?
It was, but again, I felt guilty to my colleagues, to stay at home. Mm-hmm. And this was 35 years ago. So I didn't want to be um, a difficult woman to the men working with me.
So how do you think it is now because you're still in the Netherlands, right? So in the Netherlands, how is it now for women who are going to have children and in cardiology who would like to take maternity leave? Is it frowned upon? Do they need to feel guilty, or is it easy enough to
Well,
just say, no, I'm due?
the official rules have been improved. So you can't be in the cath lab when you're pregnant. So there are a lot of things on paper that have improved. But we've also in the book, together with a younger journalist, she has interviewed many younger colleagues. And, you know, if you want to go into training cardiology, they can still tell you in this time of where we're living in, that it's better not to become pregnant because we need you on the work floor. So don't do it. And we put your uterus on the cupboard until after you're finished with your training. And we interviewed one woman, and so during her training, she got a twin, which is quite funny. And another one, so these are young women. Another one, she got three children, and on a party, she wanted to introduce her husband to the chief of cardiology, and he only said, "So you are the man who 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 made those children?" You know, very friendly. And I know from a very good, she's also in the book, she's a cardiac surgeon, brilliant. I met her 10 years ago, and then she said to me, I would love to be a cardiac surgeon. And I said, well, perhaps I can help you. I can introduce you to the cardiac surgery, and perhaps you can do a project and then enter training. So that happened. And she's now ready as a cardiac surgeon, but she's 35. And she has no partner, but she wants to have children. So she's now a single mom with two lovely boys. And there's now no room in Dutch cardiac surgery for her because the surgeons in all kinds of clinics have told her you should have chosen between cardiac surgery or children. You are unreliable because you have no partner. And this is 2024 we're talking about.
Yeah, they
So
should not be allowed to say such things.
The attitude is still unfriendly. And there's so many young people now who are single parents, and it's her responsibility to take care for those children, not the colleagues in the hospital. And she arranges it. She does it quite, she can do it. But she's now going to be a doctor for unemployment people. So she leaves cardiac surgery, and you know she looks nice. She has brilliant hands. She can operate very well, but she's not welcome.
So what are we
She's
going to do?
unreliable.
What are we going
Sorry?
to do what are we going to do to change this then? Because that really shouldn't have been allowed, should it? People are not
No.
allowed
So
to say that sort of thing.
we wrote this story in the book. She agreed with that. The book that came 2 weeks ago, and there will be an interview next the coming weekend, also in important medical Dutch paper that all doctors read. So I hope that by making a fuss about it, we can help her because she still has her registration. And what she says, cardiac surgery is my passion. She can do it. But,
Mm.
I know so many of those men who made several children, in trainees, in the cupboard somewhere. They did. So we should get rid of that culture.
So I wonder, I mean, it's in most countries, they don't also insist on you not going into the cath lab for the whole of pregnancy. And actually, many procedures in the cath lab now are done with far less radiation than they used to be.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
that's kind of an outdated concept that probably needs to be addressed as well, because if they only had to come out of the cath lab for a couple of months rather than a whole year, basically, then, they could more easily continue with their training.
yeah, yeah. Well, when I was doing my pregnancies and even before, I wore three skirts with a Geiger teller, what would you call it, underneath.
Yeah, yeah.
And if we put a Geiger teller in front of a window, it had more radiation than below my skirt. So that was to make me feel comfortable. And there was a very nice lady, head of the radiology department, and she helped me in dressing properly because I told her that I wanted to get pregnant. So this woman, she helped me. But I couldn't tell my colleagues because they didn't want to have a young pregnant colleague.
Right. So we certainly still need to change attitudes. So
And
if
we
you,
need to tell those stories because, we need to feel also those who still behave unfriendly, we need to feel them uncomfortable.
right.
And there are also women who may be quite nasty to younger female because sometimes women can adapt so much to the male culture that they are even worse than their male colleagues
And there may be
because
women
they
who
don't
want
want
it.
to be identified with those failing women. They want to
Right.
be from a different group.
Well, and also they may have not been able to have children themselves because of these rules and feel it's unfair that people coming up behind don't have to suffer as they did. But
Maybe, yeah,
clearly one has to allow positive change,
yeah,
to
yeah.
happen, even if it was not good for our generation. So if you were speaking to yourself, but you were just entering cardiology now, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, well, I think I would still love to go into women's cardiology, but I would try harder to take the men with me. I would really try to avoid to get isolated as the one who takes care of the women.
Mhm.
This isolation hasn't done me well. So you should encourage the men to work with you. And perhaps you should give them some good positions at publications. Sometimes men need a bit that. Um, and ask them on the stage also to give a talk about women's cardiology. Um, you should perhaps I should try to help them more to overcome the shame in talking about women because that's still a bit there.
Would you ever advise women not to go into cardiology?
Well, I think if you have, I've quite a tough character, but if you don't have that, if you know, um, if you don't have a tough character and you're more into, talking, we don't all have the same character, but if you're, perhaps if you're a nicer woman, I wouldn't go into cardiology, no.
Cardiology needs these nicer women.
Yeah, you're right. But the time is not ripe yet for very friendly women in cardiology. You still need to be strong.
Need to be strong. So, apart from being strong, what would you say are the most important characteristics to have if you want to be successful in cardiology
Um,
as a woman?
well, don't hesitate to ask, nasty questions. Why are you doing this? Isn't that unfriendly what you're doing? You try to, I've been quite confronting to my colleagues. Sometimes I've waited too long in saying something. So, and then all of a sudden, I got very angry and they thought, well, what happens? So it's better to discuss things more before you get really angry. Because then they think, well, this is, again, one of those nasty, angry women, and they don't like that. So try to be friendly, but very clear. Confront them. And what often happens when they get older, and they sometimes have daughters who go into medicine, then the thinking changes because they don't want their daughters to be harassed and intimidated in medicine. Then they start to realize how it can be. That's helpful. And then you have a partner. If they realize what can happen to their daughters, then you have a partner to change the culture.
Right. So, but they shouldn't have to be our daughters for us to partner with them and help them. I think, it's important now, as we were saying, for the older women cardiologists who've already been successful and can, stand up and say perhaps more openly what they're seeing is wrong.
And don't forget also for the older women, don't forget your own barriers. And it's not right to think, well, I had so many barriers. Now the young generation, they need to have the same barriers. No, that's not right. Be more helpful and give the floor to the younger generation. Why not? And what I've learned, if you start giving the floor and opportunities earlier to the next generation, you will get it back 1,000 times later on. So you lose nothing. You only gain in being helpful to others. That's really the case.
Okay, I think that's a lovely message to end on. Thank you. So be helpful and support the others that are coming up behind you.
Yeah.
Okay.